In this interview, Christopher Avery talks about 1. His struggles with studying when he was younger. 2. The effect that stressors have on our body and the physical symptoms related to that. 3. Why he is bigger than his problems. And 4. Our ability to respond, also called responsibility. I'm Yves Hanul from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it. Hello, good evening, and welcome everyone. Tonight I have with me Christopher Avery. And I say tonight because for me it's almost 9 o'clock. Christopher, what time zone are you in and what time is it on your side?
Yes, I'm in the United States, and hello, Eve. Great to be here. And I'm in Texas, which is in Central Time Zone, and it's just before 2 p.m.
And thank you for sharing where you're from. And just like I've done in the last ones, I'm going to show people where people are. So I'm in Belgium, in near Ghent, and that's somewhere here.
And
Well,
I've
my
been there. I've been to your
well,
house. Yeah, that is.
that's the interesting part. You've been to my house, but Google hasn't found my house yet because what's on the blue dot there is my house, but Google doesn't have a picture yet. And your house is somewhere, and then Google will move us from Belgium to the United States, and then we'll end up near Austin. And I say near because I didn't put in the exact address, but just to give people an idea on where we are on both sides, because that's the world that we're living in. Everybody remote these days and remote conversations. So
The exciting and in-demand city of Austin, Texas.
exactly. And let's move back to both on screen. Hello, back. So, but we jumped in immediately, or I jumped in immediately without a good introduction. So, Christopher, if you would introduce yourself, what do you want people to know about who you are?
Well, probably my story uh, is that today I'm known for being the author of a couple of books that agilists really like, and we'll get to those in a minute. Um, I wasn't a great student growing up because for some reason I didn't have to study in high school, and I got to college and realized I had no study skills, and it took me a number of years in different schools to finally get a degree, and I started my career in sales and sales management, and and I had an uneasy feeling. And as I explored that uneasy feeling through journaling and other things, I realized that my role model for going to work and having a career was my dad. And my dad was outwardly successful. He was an executive with a corporation. He worked in Manhattan, New York City, in a headquarters when I was born. Um, and then when I was pretty young, he got sent away from headquarters out to Ashtabula, Ohio, where I grew up, where he worked in a plant as the manager of quality control. And there's some points to this story, but one interesting one is that he had studied with Edwards Deming in the 40s before Edwards Deming went to Japan. And he tried desperately to bring Edwards Deming statistical process control into Union Carbide, which is where he was working. And they rejected it. So he ended up spending his career inspecting quality out instead of building it in. And that was very frustrating for him. And he came home every day, as I recall, he came home every day from work tired and sore and frustrated and pissed off, and had lifelong high blood pressure, which eventually killed him about 10 years after he retired. And
Wow.
and this was my uneasiness. Was here I was at the beginning of, you know, adulthood career, had my college diploma, and and I didn't want to come home from work every day tired and sore and frustrated and pissed off and have high blood pressure. And of course, Eve, we all know so many people who have, you know, symptoms of physical health symptoms due to stressors in life and work.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So a professor contacted me and said, go take your GREs. So GREs are graduate record exam. That's in the United States. That's if you want to go to grad school in many of the sciences or arts, you take the GREs. And I said, okay. So I went and took the GREs and sent him the results. And he called me back and said, did you see these results? And I said, yeah. So I didn't interpret them in the same context he did. Well, I had scored extremely high in all three of the areas of analytical and quantitative and verbal. And he said, you're coming back here for a master's degree, and then you can go to any PhD program in the world that you want to go to.
Wow.
So, yeah, so that was my opportunity to not grow up yet, right? So I had, you know, I had a short time in a career and all the jobs I had before finishing college. And I went back to grad school to study organization science and leadership. Um, and uh, and the other part of that was I was the pesky graduate student that kept throwing red flags, kept saying BS on the professors because I had a little bit of real life experience working in organizations. And I wasn't just a naive graduate student that came straight out of college into graduate school and accepted whatever we were being told. And that led me to a decision to not be a professor, even though I went to a very well-known institution that produces researchers and professors. And I wanted to go back to industry and be a consultant. And by golly, that's what I've been for all these years now. So my first big break was having IBM ask me to build a workshop for software project leaders about how to build teams. This is decades ago. This is decades before, well, probably a decade before the Agile Manifesto.
So some time ago.
Yeah, some time ago. And so I'd been studying organizational agility for a long time. And we knocked it out of the park. I recruited a couple of colleagues to help, and we knocked it out of the park and had a killer program, which eventually turned into my book, Teamwork as an Individual Skill. So I had the idea of being able to take personal responsibility for collaboration and for building teams. Thank you, Eve. And from there, I decided to try to understand what is personal and shared responsibility, because I used the idea of shared responsibility for teamwork. So my definition of a team is when a group of people step up to the opportunity that's presented to them by a shared responsibility. And anybody who's ever been on a great team knows that there's an organic shift that happens in ourselves when a team starts to gel. And that shift is, part of that shift is that, number one, we feel more of a sense of ownership of the project or the mission or whatever it is we're trying to do, the technology, than we did previously. And that sense of ownership is bigger than just our job or our part of it. And we feel a sense of ownership for our colleagues, for our teammates, and the communication with them and the relationships. And when that happens,
I remember back around the time I read your first book, there was a lot of people say, well, there is no I in team. and I was really struggling with it because exactly what you say, in a good team, everybody takes responsibility. So there is no I in team if there is no ego in team. Yeah, in that sense, but there's definitely an individual in teamwork that makes it work. And your book helped me so much to understand that. So that was for me. I don't think your process was fully discovered yet. I think at the time that you wrote that book, but for me, it was a big discovery. It was really like, oh, okay, that's how teamwork works. It helped me click a lot of things.
Yeah, thank you so much, Eve. So that metaphor of there is an I in team was under consideration to be a title for it, but it is such a cliche that we decided to not go that way. And if you haven't seen it, there's other people show that there is an I. See right here in the A. If you shade in,
Yeah, I know.
right, and there's so you can
Depending on exactly.
yeah, depending on the size of the A, you can see those images out on the net. So so because I was trying to figure out how do I explain, how do I understand how personal responsibility works in the mind, and how do I explain that to engineers and coders? That led me to a search for, for understanding the cognitive processing of responsibility. So it's not just a character trait, but it's actually a pattern in our minds, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And so, since about 2006 or 7, I've pivoted from a focus entirely on collaboration and teamwork and partnering to a focus on leadership and personal responsibility. Yeah, and then
And what I'm hearing is that this was hugely impacted by what you saw with your father. I mean, the whole
huge
I,
because Eve, you and I and everybody watching this, we know dozens, if not hundreds, of people that feel like their lives are out of control. They're living lives. They're smart. They're educated. They're ambitious. They're highly moral. They're people of great character, and they're working jobs, living careers, living lives that they don't know how they got there, and they don't know how to change. And I see that every day. And my purpose in the world is to help people see how they can be free by understanding the responsibility process in their own mind and how to use that to free themselves.
and to take the responsibility to change the situation where they're in multiple ways. It might be to make sure that they can have the situation they want at work, and if at some point it doesn't work, okay, take responsibility for their life and move on and do something else. So we of course we don't have the time to fully go into the full responsibility model, but I think a lot of people will recognize why we want to do this. So we kind of jumped into that first question. What is something that how do I wrote it again? What's something that people usually don't know about you but has influenced you when you are? That what I'm hearing is that this is the situation that your father had. Is there something else that you want to add to the situation, or you think this is the most important part?
Well, so the other part, and I don't really hide this much, so people may know this about me if they've been around me, is I knew around my college years that there was a part of me that was broken, and I didn't like it, and I didn't know how to fix it. So, and that was that I could be very demeaning and dismissive and very judgmental and critical of folks, which of course is a sign of me lacking confidence and lacking self-esteem, and so I need to tear other people down to build myself
Feel
up.
better.
Yeah, so I didn't understand that at the time, but I had been really good at behavioral conditioning earlier. I'm a great dog cat trainer, so I figured I could just figure out how to recondition this in myself, and I failed at being able to do that. So I started on a search for what I called integrity, um, very young, probably around 20, 21, 22 years old. And that was also part of this whole path, and part of my dad's story. And it was 15 years later that I got introduced to the people that were pulling the responsibility process research together. And this is what I used to mend myself. It's what I used to find those buttons, those triggers, whatever. I call it yuck. Go in and find that yuck in my mind, and examine it until I completely understood it and why it was there, and then it disappeared. And so today I'm no longer judgmental and critical and demeaning of others. And I have much more acceptance and compassion and loving kindness. And, that's not bad for one lifetime.
Yeah, I was about to say, if you can do this even at well, you were pretty young at that level already. I think that's amazing, because I see many people around me still struggling with it. I yeah, I think we all have demons, and we probably all still chase some of our demons until very late in life. But it's really interesting to see that you understand already at a young age what some of your demons are and how you can deal with that. That's wonderful. And the way I understand it, that searching for your own demons and searching for your own yak or whatever it is to cure yourself, for lack for a better word, you've discovered the responsibility process, what helps you sharing the world and healing the world in a sense. So that's nice. I really like it, because I never heard that story, but I'm not surprised, because what I see is that the best things that people share are typically the kind of things that they've discovered themselves because they needed it somehow. It helps them in their part of their life, and so yeah, that I'm not surprised to hear a story like that. I want to jump into that next question, because I know we don't have. I don't want to have again a podcast of 2 hours. I just recorded one last week. It was 2 hours, so I'm trying to make it a little bit shorter. And this next question is, if you had not been to IT, and I use IT very broadly because I see the agile world also as an IT world. So in that sense, I see you in the IT world. But if you had not been doing what you were doing today, do you have any idea what else could have become of you?
That's a really good question. So the I worked for 5 years in a consulting firm while I had not yet finished my dissertation. So they call it ABD, all but dissertation. So I finished my coursework for my PhD, but hadn't done a dissertation. And I worked in a consulting firm, which was called Technology Futures, and it was PhD level operations researchers, engineers, doing technology lifecycle kinds of studies. For instance, so I worked there from 1985 to 1991 when I started my company, which today is called the Responsibility Company. So one of their big claims to fame was that they did the technology learning curve work and they wrote a paper that said that by sometime in the 1990s, I can't remember when, if you were building a house in the United States, or maybe it was early 2000, if you were building a house in the United States, you might not even install twisted copper, twisted pair for a telephone line. And that made a big splash in the cellular industry and the phone industry. So anyway, it was, and I was in this consulting firm, I was the resident social scientist. I was doing seminars and workshops and papers on creativity and entrepreneurship and innovation and things like that. And, I guess that's where I found out that I could communicate with engineers and technology folks. And I realized that systems thinking was a really good way to communicate with these folks. And so I've always enjoyed, I say I work for the smartest people on the planet and the busiest people on the planet. So I've always enjoyed working with really smart, analytical, quantitative folks. And so I've always worked in product development arenas, or project management, or IT, or at least I've worked for.
Yeah, but what I'm hearing is, well, now you're still working in that same kind of sector, but you do it mostly to help people, and the products are basically the teams or the people in the teams, depending on where you focus on. But
I,
before that was, yeah, that's a different kind of product than, yeah, in that sense.
so the vision I got in my head when you said, if I wasn't doing this, what would I be doing? I saw myself sitting at a bar drinking beer. So
Oh,
I don't know. I mean, how many of us were this far away from, Skid Row, or being homeless, or on the streets, or, not making it. So I think of anybody who has finished high school, gone through post high school education, college, graduate degrees, gotten themselves on their feet, good job, family. I think we all dodged a lot of bullets. And so that was really what I thought to this question was, if I hadn't found this work and found an audience in IT, I could be sweeping floors, or in jail, or dead. Who knows?
you're not the first person who says I could have been in jail. So that's yeah, it's definitely an option for well, I think for all of us. We don't know, of course, what could have happened.
Yeah.
That's it's I think it's good to think, especially when we're a little bit well, we're both past 50 at that moment. It's fair to say that half of our life is already past. So if we're that age, it's good to sometimes think about how lucky we were in some parts, because indeed sometimes there shouldn't be much that could have happened when we're younger to make us go in a completely different direction. And that kind of brings me in an opposite way to that next question. That is, what is your biggest challenge, on how do you see the things that are still challenging you? You already talked a little bit about one of your challenges, past life. Are there still other things that you're already feel comfortable sharing?
Sure. Let me share two challenges. And I'd like to talk more about the second one than the first one. My biggest challenge right now is that I'm dealing with some kind of a health pattern over the last 7 years that's proven to not be easily diagnosed or dealt with. And sometimes it just knocks me down. And so the way, and I did get diagnosed with depression and general anxiety, which made no sense to me that I would have such anxiety after years of practicing emotional clearing and releasing and responsibility. So there's something biological, chemical, or energetic going on. And it's come and gone. So, I don't speak about this a lot. I did write a blog post about it and send out an email to everyone in the responsibility community about it a few months back. And the blog post on my website is called "I'm Bigger Than This Problem," which is one of my principles. Is I'm bigger than every problem. No problem is bigger than me. I won't let it be bigger than me. I control the size of a problem. And that's kind of a hack, because the way our mind works, when we have a problem, it looks huge and enormous, and we allow it to be bigger than us. So that's my biggest challenge right now, and I'm doing lots of things to keep running that down. And I look forward to a day, hopefully soon, when I'll be able to say that I've left that challenge behind me. But it affects my ability to make commitments. And, so I think I've told you, Eve, and others, if I didn't make an application to speak at your conference, or if I turned down your opportunity to write a chapter for your book, or didn't take some meeting with you, it's not because I didn't want to. It's because I just do as little commitment these days as necessary, so I can focus on my health and focus on being able to do my work. So let's turn to the second one, doing my work. My biggest challenge is helping someone commit to developing a responsibility practice. That's my biggest challenge. So my first big challenge was to, figure out how to communicate the responsibility process to people that would be informative and inspiring and engaging. And I can tell you, even you know this, that I can now just, inspire and titillate the heck out of an audience with a keynote on the responsibility process. But the challenge is not just having somebody being inspired with this information and this content, but them actually putting it to use every day in their life. And that takes courage. And that takes a willingness to face one's anxiety, which could show up as stuck point or coping or complaining or wishing if only, or showing up as, when X finally happens, then I'll be happy. So it's all thinking that that life is happening to you, and much of it is not enjoyable or likable. And most people aren't willing to face that. And if I'm going to, for me to get to the next level in what I'm trying to do with the responsibility process, I want to do two things. One is I want to find those people who are willing to do that work faster and get them into my community. And I want to, if there is a way to make it easier, simpler, more convenient for others to start a responsibility practice, I want to discover that.
And that is a challenge, of course. I recognize that for a lot of people, it is sometimes, but the thing is, if it would have been so easy, maybe there would be less value in a sense that there is so much value that sometimes you need to do hard work to get there. And that's of course, part of why people sometimes are afraid to start these things. I recognize that with a lot of the things that we're learning with people. And I think the people that know me know that I like to work with the responsibility process in the teams for the exact same thing. If people start to understand that they take responsibility, that they can kind of mimic and look at what parts are where they're responsible for their own situation, that they can go to the next level, also at team level. But like you say, it's a challenge, and I maybe not run into every day, but at least every week, there is some things that I afterwards think like, oh, but there I was finding some excuse and I was blaming someone else, or I was not taking responsibility. So I think we can all use some acceleration in doing that better. That's for sure.
My mentor, Bill McCarley, who introduced me to this, who's I call him the father of the responsibility process. So he says, he frequently says, only the brave get to be free. So just to clarify, if people aren't aware of this, taking responsibility in our case doesn't mean operating with good character. It doesn't mean being a good person. It means getting to the mental state of freedom, choice, and power, where you can free yourself from all the victimhoods. And in that mental state, you are far more resourceful in your thinking, which is how you figure out new directions to go to, which will make you happier. So when he says only the brave get to be free, it takes some courage to practice responsibility and learn how to get yourself to that mental state of responsibility over and over and over again, where you can create new choices that tap into your personal power, create personal power for you, and provide amazing freedom of mind, freedom from anxiety, freedom from stuckness.
I like the way you put it, because freedom doesn't mean you can do anything you want. Freedom, but that's the kind of thing that people say, freedom of speech. Well, you're still, or you're not free from some of the consequences of your actions and of your thoughts and of your things you're saying, but you do take responsibility fully for what you do, and then you're really free in like you say, in the mind, to yeah, free about the consequences, and free of everything that you're doing. I
Right.
want to go to that next question because I feel that we're kind of already moving into that into that part. Is that what drives you? Because I know you're a driven person. At the same time, you were very clear earlier on. Okay, some of the problems make me sometimes say no to people because I want to focus on the responsibility process. So, do you know where that drive is coming from? Where that desire or coming from to do that work?
I probably have a different answer for that than what you might expect. So, in introducing people to the responsibility process, I start with an image that shows a circle and a line and another circle or oval, and this image is called two minds. And I explain it as saying that most people understand a model of the mind that says we have an upper mind and a lower mind, and the upper mind is more resourceful and generative and creative, and the lower mind uh, is is full of defensiveness and resistance. So you might call that the ego mind. And it's really helpful to understand these two minds in terms of the drivers in them. So you ask, what drives me? So in the ego mind, we're driven by approval, safety, and control. Approval, safety, and control. Approval, safety, and control. And by control, what I mean is we want to control the next microsecond of our reality, and we want it to look like the reality that we've already installed, which is why nobody likes change, right? And it's why we get upset when things happen, is because in that micro moment, we've become out of control.
And we
Um,
don't like it when people do things that were not expected to us. And yeah,
yeah. So
I'm
approval,
sure recognize that part.
right? So when I'm in my lower mind, I'm driven by wanting to be approved of, by feeling safe, and by trying to control my world. But I am very well practiced at getting to the upper mind, and the drivers in the upper mind are what I call your unique genius and your unique inspiration, which together generates your unique expression of self, your authentic expression of self. And so my drivers are, you know, what what inspires me deeply to make a contribution that well, I'm an Aries, so I'm selfishly generous and generously selfish. So it seems that my contributions also serve me, um, and I'm inspired to do that. But of course, if I don't take care of me, I can't serve anybody else. So it's a great situation. And uh, my unique genius seems to be that I'm a performer. I'm a learner and a performer. And so something else people don't know about me is that when I was young, I was in various jazz and rock and roll bands and orchestras. I was then in college for theater, and then radio, TV, film. And I thought I was going to be a rock star or a TV star. And then in grad school, I got to work in this consulting firm and started doing seminars and workshops and facilitation and stuff like that. And I discovered I'm, in all of these lives, what has driven me is to be a performer. And so I'm doing that today by being a student of responsibility and a teacher of responsibility and a content creator of responsibility.
But having still the eyes on you when you share, yeah, you're not sharing a song and you're not rocking on the stage. You're not in a television studio where people watch you talking whatever, but you're talking now and be a performer talking about the responsibility process. I like that because it's yeah, it's something I totally didn't expect. But at the same time, I recognize it. I see a lot of, well, we it's like you say, a lot of us agile coaches, trainers. Yeah, there is a part that we want to help, but we also like to be in the spotlight, and we like to share things to people. Um, and I'm not surprised to hear many of us talking about a previous past life where we were either musicians, DJs, were yeah. I just talked with someone else, or actually, there's something going live this week with with Geepaw, where he talks about being on stage as an actor, and so that's, yeah, many of us have these past lives. So I didn't know that about you, but at the same time, I'm again not so surprised. It's and that kind of brings me also in sideways of what you consider your biggest achievements, because maybe it was something of your past. Do you consider that responsibility process one of your books? Is there something else you find your biggest achievement, something that you're really proud of?
Yeah, so externally, out there in the world, I think with the publication of this book, I've reached a level of satisfaction, especially when it was so well received. Um, and
And
um,
translated, I think it was translated in a few languages. Am I correct there?
just German so far. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Still.
So, but you know, I think my biggest achievement is that I think, I don't know how to say this. There's a couple of ways to say this. Um, I believe that I am living my divine purpose. Uh, I, so it's this idea that we come into this world with some kind of a contract to do something or get something done. So this would be from the views of living perhaps a spiritual life or a spiritual existence. And so I think that's my biggest achievement because I believe that I'm on the path to enlightenment, whether it's in this lifetime or another. So today I operate as much at the metaphysical level as I do at the physical level. Metaphysics simply means beyond the physical. And our industries, the people we work for, are um, are at the top of understanding Newtonian physics and linear cause and effect logic and thinking. But I believe that there are levels of consciousness way beyond that, uh, which means beyond the physical. And that's where I'm doing my studies today, and that's where I'm learning, and it's where I'm taking myself for my own growth. And it's very
And where
sad.
you feel that you can, like you said, yeah, you this is your biggest achievement in the sense that you can live that life in yeah, in the best possible way, in a sense, doing that,
Well,
sharing it, learning it, and yeah, that's.
well, there's quite a few of us who are operating in the realm of bringing consciousness to leadership in the agile space. I love what the Collective Edge is doing from Michael Hammond and Michael Spayd. I love what Michael Sahota and Audree are doing.
Mhm.
Um, and and it's really a responsibility practice is an awareness practice. It's a consciousness raising practice. I happen to
Mm.
think it's I happen to think it's eminently more practical than what these other guys are doing, but I have nothing against what they're doing because there are people who see what they're doing as eminently practical for them. So it's just, the responsibility material is what grabbed me. And in it, I found consciousness growth. And in terms of an achievement, um, I think the Buddha once said that he said, "Rare it is to be born a human. Rarer it is to know about enlightenment, and rarer it is to be in pursuit of enlightenment." So uh, uh, And he also says that once you get a taste of what it is, then it's inevitable. It just may take a few hundred or a few thousand lives. So, so I believe that's, my greatest achievement is my own using this lifetime on Earth to make some consciousness progress.
Wow, that's very deep. That's probably one of the deepest answers I had for this. Thank you for sharing this. I want to go to a completely different kind of topic. Is that we already talked briefly about it, or you briefly talked about so what you do, and so the difference between the book version and this video version for me was to add this personal agility tip, because what I've noticed is that many of us, we are we use some kind of things to keep ourselves sane or to become better in our work. Is there something that you do that that you want to share with the rest of the world?
Yeah, I guess if I might have two, I'll see if I can do this quickly. So I define agility in a way uniquely from the world of responsibility. I define agility as to change without changing. And what I mean by that is to be able to change small c, to be able to change direction, priorities, tools, etc., without changing big C, meaning changing identity, changing who I am. And why that's important is because our whole career system is designed for us to identify with our title or our role or our position. And so the tip would be to identify with something about yourself that's bigger than your role or title or position, so that when you see opportunities to make a pivot or to shift or to change priorities or to change direction, it's not attached to your identity. Your identity is bigger than that. So that's the first tip. And
that's indeed powerful. That's indeed something that helps a lot of people. So yeah, let's add a second one. If you quickly can add a second one, that's nice.
Sure. Start and build a responsibility practice. So I see responsibility as the essence of agility, right? Responsibility is the ability to respond. And many people see responsibility as the essence of agility. So, I think if you want to up your agility game, start and build a responsibility practice. And so by responsibility practice, what I mean is that every time something goes wrong in our lives, our mind dives down to blame. So all of these mental states are some sort of victimhood, but some are seen as being more approving than others. But every human has all of these mental states in us, and it's how we respond to anxiety, to things going wrong. And so responsibility practice means every day, all day in my life, things go wrong. But I don't dwell in the victimhood. I know how to get myself from the bottom of that chart up to resourceful thinking in microseconds. And most people hold on to their grievances for weeks and months and years and decades. And they'll never be free that way. So if you want to be more agile, start a responsibility practice. I'm here to help you.
I liked it because, well, I liked what I liked when I first read about or talked to you is that you always, what I remember from that first conversation is you said, well, people have a favorite island. Some people prefer to be in blame and blaming others people. Other people feel they prefer the shame or the obligation. And yeah, that's it's for me. It was indeed very interesting to see. Okay, we all of us, me, you, everyone, we have a favorite island, and once we recognize that, it's much easier to go beyond it. And that really helped me understanding, well, first of all myself, because that's the first step the most important step, I think, to understand myself, to see where I'm stuck, and what it takes me to go to the next step.
Right.
Because at the same time, I think we also, maybe we don't stress it enough, but I think we all have moments that we reach out responsibility, but we're just not always doing it. And like you say, the ones of us that are better are reaching responsibility much more often and very much quicker. And yeah, that just knowing that these two states exist in myself helped me a lot, to say, okay, now I'm probably stuck here. Okay, what could I do to go to the next level?
Right.
I'm still not there yet. I'm still struggling. I see myself blaming others, shaming myself, and all these other steps. But yeah, just knowing it helps me a lot in taking the responsibility.
Right. You said a key thing that I want to stress for your audience is that this is a natural pattern in the mind. This isn't something we made up. This comes out of thousands of
Research.
observations of coaching people who are reporting why they can't have what they want and why they're stuck. And two different researchers, my mentor and his mentor, separately started building this pattern, and they found themselves using the same words to describe the different mental states and the same order of the mental states. And so I also want to reinforce what you said, Eve, which is we naturally get to responsibility, right? And the way that you know that is every time you've had a significant aha, insight, growth moment in your life, you've probably been hanging out on one of these other islands. I call them islands of the mind, and had some, some willingness to really look at it, and looking at it gave you a new answer, and you popped to responsibility. So yeah, you've gone through this pattern thousands or tens of thousands of times in your life. What our work does is it helps you to really recognize that and be able to do it much, much more quickly and do it at will anytime you want to do it.
Yeah, I think that's the core thing, at will, because yeah, like you say, we've done it, or like I said earlier, we've done it. We've sometimes got stuck, sometimes we break through the boundaries, but it's really good to understand, to see. And I have to say, since I've been actively working with this process, that yeah, I can recognize when I'm stuck. I can recognize the moments that I'm dwelling, both in professional as in personal life. I can recognize now some of that. It might still take me too long on on the bad days like that, or the bad weeks, but still, yeah, I'll get to most of the time. So that really helps me. So thank you for sharing all of that. And I want to go to the next part, which is a completely different thing. But oh no, not this one. This one. Not the book yet. Let's talk about the remote working, because I know that, yeah, well, just like all of us, you've been stuck at home, but I know I've seen multiple of your work also doing online. Is there anything about remote work that you've learned that you want to share with the rest of the world?
You don't have to drive to the office. I say that tongue in cheek. I don't know that I have any particular expertise in remote work, except that I've been doing it for 25 years. So I gave up office space with my team around 1990, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5. So since 1995, I've officed at home. I tell people I office at home and get on planes to go to work. And if I can share one humorous story about that, for 16 years, I lived in Comfort, Texas, which is a rural area, and lived on 6 acres, and bought a property that had multiple buildings on it, one of which was a little tiny pool cabana, about 300 square feet, which would be, I don't know how many square meters. And it was next to the pool that was on the property. And we turned that into my office. And a year later, my youngest son was in kindergarten, and when the teacher was asking all the students what their parents did, my son said, "My daddy sits by the pool and talks to his friends on the phone." And my wife got worried about that, and she called the teacher and said, "No, my husband is not a drug dealer." So
That's indeed, well, your drug of choice is then teaching people how to become better at their life, which might be the most addictive drug once you get used to it, but it's probably not what people think when they talk about dealing drugs.
yeah, yeah. So I've never had an issue with social life, needing to have the office for social life. Um, I've been doing online uh, webinars and training since 2010. Um, and I think the one thing that I was very fortunate about when COVID hit was that my space, my home, was already set up for remote work. So I didn't have to go through a process of figuring out how to partition or find, privacy, or not have people see the dogs or kids or, other people running around the house. So I definitely have compassion for anyone who is in a situation where they weren't prepared with their physical space to handle remote work. And I also have compassion for people who get a lot of energy from going into the office, with their colleagues. So somehow, I think I've been pretty fortunate that way.
I think you mentioned two important parts there. Yeah, for remote work, it is important to have the right space set up. That stays the same thing. A lot of us move to homework not completely not being prepared. Like you said in the beginning, you've been to my house, you've seen the place where I'm here. That was created with the intention I want to work more from home and I want to work more remotely. So I have everything. I have a large space. I have all my books with me. I have everything set up for remote work. But not most. Well, a lot of people are not that fortunate and did not invest in that for multiple reasons. And like you say, the other thing is, I think we're not stressing this enough on the podcast here, is that yes, we learned a lot about remote work, but it's not for everyone. Some people prefer to go to in the office, just like other people. Like you say, you were set up to work from your little office near the pool, because that your clients are working remote, or working all around the world. And yeah, for an hour of coaching, you won't jump on a plane to do that kind of stuff. So there is definitely a need to do a lot more remote, and that's the differences that are important, I think.
Yes. So I just had this thought. I think I've had the question for some time. So companies are going through an exercise now of, their hybrid work model, or their work model going forward, whether they're going to sell off their offices or bring people back and all of that. And every company is going through its own exercise in that. And some of my clients are doing that. In fact, I've got a keynote coming up with a big client in Brazil that's doing a big reorientation for all 7,000 employees about, how they're going to do their new hybrid work model. And they want 100% responsibility in each person for that. So we're bringing this message in that. But wouldn't it be cool if those companies that are inviting people to stay remote, and maybe they're selling off some assets, wouldn't it be cool if those companies could convert those assets into expense reimbursements for someone to move from a 2-bedroom home to a 3-bedroom home, or a 4-bedroom home if they have 2 parents that need home offices, or something like that. I haven't seen much about that, but that would be a really interesting idea if companies would invest in helping people create the space at home that they need, which may mean changing homes.
Well, and what I've seen, at least in where some people take the responsibility themselves, is that because if you don't want to go to the office anymore, you don't need to live closely to the office, so you can move out of a city and then you can move to a place where it's actually cheaper. And so I had some friends that were selling off their property and bought a new property outside a city that was actually cheaper and that was larger than the one they had before, and they were actually living a richer life, not so much in money wise but richer in environment wise, because they had, like you say, they have now places for remote work. They might have a garden where they didn't have a garden before, or they whatever what they want to do. So that's, there is definitely a lot of things that can change there.
Yes.
That I think all of us can take responsibility for, and let's hope indeed that the companies take part of their responsibility. That's definitely a nice thing to think about. Let's go to that next question, the one I popped up earlier a little bit, and I seem to have trouble with my tools. Yeah, okay. The one about the book. What's the last book or one of the books that you want to share about?
Thank you.
There it
So,
is.
yeah. So the most profound book I ever read is the one I told you I wanted to bring here. Uh, and it's a deep read, and it's not particularly about being successful in your career or business. It's called Power versus Force. And it's by my favorite scientist and spiritualist. He's both a scientist and a spiritual teacher. And his name is David Hawkins, MD, PhD. I first read this probably 20 years ago. I think this book was actually published before 2000, maybe in the late 80s.
This is why I have two covers here, because there's multiple versions. I think the one on the black and white is the 6th edition or something from this book. So it's definitely a book that's been out for quite a while.
Yeah, the black and white is the more the one that I'm more familiar with, that cover. And if you notice, the subtitle was The Hidden Determinants of Human Behavior.
Human behavior.
The Hidden Determinants of Human Behavior. The reason this is so important is because brilliant leaders and coaches and others all over the world are constantly saying, why did they do that? Why don't they do this? How could he do that? How could this country leader do what he's doing, right? How come they're not open to reason? And the reason is because they're at different levels of consciousness. And what David Hawkins did, his backstory is amazing. So his backstory was that he had some enlightened experiences early in life. He went into psychiatry, so the MD part. He was very successful, built the largest psychiatric practice in New York City, employing something like 50 psychologists and psychiatrists. And
Wow.
he was deep into meditation. He meditated 2 hours a day, an hour in the morning, an hour in the evening, and was a student of meditation and a student of consciousness and spirituality. And he had, a moment of enlightenment, which means he crossed over from a world of what we call duality, which means separation between us and objects and ideas and things, into non-duality, which means that old joke about make me one with everything. When anyone who's experienced enlightenment and our amazing saints and our sages and people like Krishna and Buddha and Jesus Christ, they lived in a completely different reality than you and I observe every day, and tell us that, that the physical parts of what we're doing, isn't really important. And, my external achievements aren't my most important achievements. And when this happens to people, generally they can't interact with society. So either they just go ahead and leave the planet, meaning they leave their body, or they stick around for some reason, and sometimes they produce great works, but it takes years to reacclimate and years to figure out how to come back and communicate and learn again and think and all of our thinking and what they call mentation is driven from ego. So they have to grab a little bit of ego back and learn how to participate in society. So he did this. He left his practice. He went to Stona, Arizona. He rented a room and had a cot, and he says an apple in the refrigerator, and he said, who needs anything more? And over the years, he had this idea to try and figure out how to teach consciousness to people who use cause-effect logic, Newtonian logic. And
wow, talking about a different kind of world.
Yeah, so he started a research program, and he used muscle testing, kinesiology, the idea that so muscle testing goes back to about the 70s, and the idea is that human tissue and animal tissue also, even amoebas, that in the presence of power or truth, think about a nurturing environment as opposed to poison or a toxic environment, they go strong. Our tissues go strong, and in a toxic environment, our tissues go weak. And the way they do this is you use two people, and one person is instructed to hold their arm out, and the other person says, I'm going to press down on your wrist with two fingers after posing a question out to the universe. And I want you to resist. And the thing is, if what they're posing is toxic or false, then you cannot hold your hand up. I don't care what kind of bodybuilder you are. Two fingers pushing down on it will collapse it. But if it's truth, if it's nurturing, then even a small person, their shoulder will lock, and the tester won't be able to push down on their wrist. So this is fascinating, and it proves what Carl Jung had hypothesized. And Carl Jung had hypothesized that we live in a database of consciousness, and we're surrounded all the time with all the information that ever has been. And we can get an immediate immediate answer to any yes/no question that we have. So if you and I were in the same room together, Eve, we could discover what the Queen of England had for breakfast yesterday just by muscle testing. We could say, well, it was porridge, weak, nope. She had pudding, weak, nope. She had eggs, strong, yes. She had tea, strong, yes. Right. So
wow, okay, that's a very interesting way to test out some of that stuff.
Yes. So get the book. That the thing is that he created a 1,000-point logarithmic scale of consciousness, and all of the great avatars in history calibrated 1,000. Enlightenment happens at 600. The move from negative to positive is at 200, and that means at 200 is where we start integrity and morality and courage, moral courage. I recently calibrated Putin. Putin calibrates around 80. Wow. And one of our former presidents that some people love and some people don't calibrates below 200 as well. And
let's not mention the name. I think we all agree on what person that is.
So our industry, Eve, our industry, science and technology, is the 400s. Anything over 200 is positive. So the 400s is all about understanding, getting better and better at Newtonian logic and cause and effect. The 500s start what he calls love and spirituality, and so for me, I now have fabulous understanding of why people do what they do.
Wow.
And I also
sounds like a very powerful book to read and to learn about a lot of these things, It, I'm, it, it's. I find it fascinating to listen to you because at the same time I'm like, wow, what incredible knowledge is in the book, and at the same time it's like, do I already understand it? Do I believe it? So it's just, there's a lot of things going on in my head about that book. So that's well, yeah, I keep telling it in most of the interviews that when I hear people talking so passionate about the book like you just done, it's like, okay, this book is popping up on my list to read it. Um, at the same time, I have to acknowledge also that just recording these takes also a lot of my time. So I read a little bit less this year than I read in other years, but I'm learning at other levels. But it's fascinating what you're sharing here. It's really like. I'm not surprised that this is a best-selling book that's going on for already many years, because I can definitely see how people would love to learn more about that. So I hope I will, like always, link to the book in the show notes and in every place where we share the video. So I hope people well like this book as much as you do. I have people keep telling me I have to tell people to put out in the comments if other people have read this book, what they feel about it, what they learned from this book, because that's really, it's, there is a lot of power in the message that you're bringing. I think we can say that.
Right. I'd like to add this is a heavy book to read. He actually wrote it as a dissertation for his PhD. And so if you get into it and find it tough going, just search for him on Audible. He did a whole bunch of tapes from lectures, and he's funny and witty in those lectures. So Audible has all sorts of tape sets of his. It's a little more accessible.
More accessible, yeah, but that's, well, when you said it, it's hard to read. If I look back at some of the best books I've read in my life, some of the books I needed to read like 2 3 times, or just start reading multiple times before I get through it. And sometimes you know it just after 1 or 2 chapters, like, this is so deep, this is so important, but at the same time, like, I need to be in the right headspace to learn it. I need to be rested, I need to be, yeah, whatever needed. And yeah, there are certain books that you don't want to read quickly on a plane, or that, yeah, you need to be in the right space.
When I read his books like this one, I read 3 or 4 pages at a time, and I do it during my contemplative time in the morning, usually before meditation. So
That's an extra good tip to spend. Well, for a lot of people, the first moments in a day are the moments that we have most energy. It's depends a little bit if you're a morning or an evening person, but if you know what time of the day that is working really well for you to grab new information, that's the right moment to read, like you say, 5 to maximum 10 pages, because then for these kind of books, that's really what most of us, well, let's talk just by myself, that's what I can grasp for such hard books. So that's a tip on its own. Okay, I want to move on because we don't have much time, I think. What question should I ask you also, and what's the answer?
uh, I'm only coming up with humorous questions and answers. So
That's
uh,
fine as well.
so the question is why, and the answer is I don't know. Um, yeah, why are we here? What's the meaning of life? How about that one?
Wow.
Yeah. And the answer is the meaning is whatever you give to it. I happen to believe that I'm here to make progress, growing in consciousness, as explained by this 1,000-point scale. That's what I believe. Um,
That's well, it's completely in line with almost everything you said, and it's the same time it's deep, and it helps people to think about. I find it interesting when I look back at the whole series, the a lot of the interviews, a lot of people talk about similar kind of things. Either it is what is currently going on in the agile world, or what's the future for agile? And for me, this question is similar to why are we here? Why is it? And that's it feels that if I compare to when I originally created this question 10 years ago in the book version, it moved in lots of different directions. I have the feeling that a lot of us now moving in this. Why are we here? What are we doing it? I do wonder if 2 years of pandemic and now being in the middle of a war makes us think much harder about that, because I think it's definitely influenced us and how we look at things.
I think so
I
too.
want to I want to go to that next question about who do you think I should ask next?
Yeah, I nominate Nadine and Henning Wolf. Nadine and Henning are partners. Henning is one of the founders of IT Agile in Germany. Nadine left her first career as a hairstylist, a hair cutter, and became an agile coach. And they obviously met and fell in love and became a pair. And Henning also, they also had the rights, I think, to the lean conference Europe, and worked closely with David Anderson. And they hosted me many times at their offices, and we did train the trainer workshops. And Nadine and Henning got deeply involved in my work and in the responsibility community, and certified in all of our work, and started training it. And then a couple of years ago, they made a proposal to IT Agile that they be able to set up their own website, which is self-leadership in German. I don't know how to pronounce it. And they are my distributors in Germany for all of the responsibility company's designs and all of our products and services. So they are my colleagues in experimenting with how do we do this better, and how do we get people started practicing faster. And I just think it would be, because they have deep history in Agile and do define as agilists, where I don't necessarily define myself as an agilist. I think that would be an interesting conversation for you.
Well, I find it interesting. You don't consider yourself an agilist, but at the same time, I know from the many conversations that we had that you do understand or have a deep understanding about what agile means. I think sometimes even deeper than some of the other people that call themselves agile coaches for years. But okay, let's not talk negative about other people. But I just wanted to.
Yeah, so Agile is my single largest marketplace, and I love the Agile principles, but I identify as a responsibility student and teacher. I don't identify as an Agilist.
Of course. Yeah. Well, for me, the reason why I started talking about it is exactly that. For me, who's agile is not just about the pure agilists, but it's about people who understand it. And I'm always interested to find the people, what I would say, at the boundaries that are understanding agile. They might not do it fully, and that could be CIO doing it. That could be, I don't know, with the book we talked about, Bjorn's, because he was at Beyond Budgeting, which is, well, not fully agile and at the same time very agile. So that's the kind of thing that I think is very interesting. And for me, you're part of that group of people. As we're near the end, I want to ask that very last question. What is a good way for people to contact you, and how can they reach out to you?
Sure. My recommendation is to join the responsibility community at responsibility.com, download the poster. You can contact me. There's lots of ways to contact me through responsibility.com. If you send an email to Christopher@responsibility.com, it'll actually go to a group of our market-facing people to respond, and that includes me to do that. You can find me on LinkedIn, and if you connect with me there, be sure to tell me what you're interested in, because like so many of us now, I refuse a lot of connections because it's just prospecting for sales. So please identify yourself as coming from who is agile. So I think I'm
Yeah,
pretty.
I think you're easy to reach, but like many of us, we receive so many spam these days that we want to avoid to be too much or too easy to be reached. I like that you take even the responsible part there to talk to people about this. So thank you very much for taking the time now. It's been wonderful as always, as all the conversations that we had over I would say the last 10 years. I think I tried to remember earlier today when I met you. I think it was 2007, 2008, something like that. So it's about 14, 15 years already of for me, pure is maybe too exaggerated, but a lot of joy. So a lot of wonderful conversations, a lot of wisdom every time. And like with many of these conversations, I learn again a lot of things about you. So I'm really happy to have shared this hour with you. So thank you very much for sharing all of this.
You're welcome, Eve. Thank you, and thank you for being such an inspiration in terms of how much you give and collect from and return to the Agile community and all the wonderful content and other things that you produce. So thank you for this time and your attention and your not only your questions but your reflections with me. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for watching Who's Agile, where the stories of agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other agilists.